Joins me. I know that probably you don't hear this right off, but when you turn it on, you'll hear it. So we're glad you could join us tonight. We're doing our 9th session on Seedbeds of Rebellion. 9th session. Amazing, isn't it? And we're going to start doing, and I don't know if we'll finish, we'll see, on the spirit of Lot, which is a big deal. And if you just think this is going to be about the perversion of the city or whatever, that's not what this is really about. It is about how the world will draw you in. Amen. So I want you to go to 2 Peter chapter 2, and we'll start there. And I hope that all the young people and the millennials and the X's will listen to this, because you need to know some things. In fact, I'm going to be so bold to just say, if you're planning on trying to go to college, probably not a good idea unless you can go to the right kind. Yeah, because now we're at a time now where it's just until it changes and we get some good conservative schools going. Unless you go to a Christian college or something, normally it's not going to be a good situation. And it's going to suck you in. And you know, say, well, no, I'm a Christian. Yeah, we'll see. Okay. Let's look at verse 6 here of 2 Peter chapter 2. And we will start reading there. And I'm reading out of the New American Standard Bible, because it's new. Somebody bring coffee in? It smells good. And if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to destruction, by reducing them to ashes, having made them an example to those who would live ungodly lives thereafter. And if he rescued righteous Lot, underline that, it's interesting. Everybody say righteous Lot. Righteous Lot. Now, righteousness, as far as God's concerned, is not your lifestyle necessarily. It is a position that he gives you. He gave it to Abraham. When Abraham was a father of faith, he gives it to us when we accept Christ. And a lot of Christians don't know the difference between righteousness and holiness. Righteousness is positional, it's a gift, nothing you can earn. Holiness is different. So he says, and if he rescued righteous Lot, oppressed by the sensual conduct of unprincipled men, for by what he saw and heard, that righteous man, while living among them, felt his righteous soul tormented day after day by their lawless deeds. Very interesting, huh? Day after day, his righteous soul was tormented. Everybody say his righteous soul was tormented. That's the same thing that happens to you when you watch news. Your righteous soul will be tormented. Verse 9. Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly out of temptation and to keep the unrighteous under punishment for the day of judgment. So we can see here that the Lord knows how to deliver. I'm just going to give it to you this way. Christians are not walking very close with God. Give them an opportunity not to end up in hell. And inflict judgment on those who turn their backs on God. Now, let's go to the story here. Let's go over to Genesis, and we'll start in Genesis chapter 11. And we're just going to go through the scriptures, and I'll make comments as we go. All right? All right. And this will be good for a good study. You can actually share this with your friends and people. Christians, most of them, especially in denominational circles today, have no discernment. They don't realize that, yes, even their children can be afflicted by the world. You get around a university, I went for, of course, I was a heathen back then, I just contributed to the whole thing. Did you know I came in second place in the Bohemian Wildman contest? Second place. Second place. I tried hard, but only got second place. That's a story I'll talk to you about later. Verse 26, Terah lived 70 years and became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Now these are the records of the generation of Terah. Terah became the father of Abram, Nabal and Haran begot the father of Lot. Everybody say Lot. So Lot was Abram's nephew, right? Yes. Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of birth of the Ur of the Chaldeans. Take note of that, Ur of the Chaldeans. Both Abram and Lot, Genesis chapter 11, Abram and Lot were raised, if you can put it that way, in the Ur of the Chaldees, as well as we're going to find out a little bit later here, Canaan, part of Canaan. Both of those places are like Sodom and Gomorrah. Same things were going on, okay? Same type of people, same type of paganism, same type of sexual orientations, all that. And so that's what they came out of, all right? So as we look down here to verse 29, Abram and Nabal took wives for themselves. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nabal's wife was Milcah. And the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Askash, or whatever. Sarah was barren, so she had no child. Terah took Abraham and his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarah, his daughter-in-law, his son, Abram's wife, and they went out together from the Ur of Chaldeans in order to enter the land of the Canaans, and they went as far as Haran and settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Okay, let's go on to chapter 12. Now the Lord said to Abram, go forth out of your country and from your relatives. You see that? And from your father's house. But yet he took Lot. Big mistake. Abraham actually caused the whole thing by disobeying God. Maybe if Lot would have stayed with his family or with somebody else, it wouldn't have turned out so bad for him. But anyway, the bottom line is they disobeyed God on this. And, you know, I know that Lot probably looked at him like a son, and you know, we do that kind of stuff sometimes. We don't listen to God about things, you know. I remember one time Stella and I, we were in Reno, and Stella's cousin named Maria wanted to come from Panama to America. And she's about, how old was she, honey? 18, 21, 19? And, you know, nice looking girls, because, you know, everybody in Panama is beautiful. And I saw a picture of her and everything. I go, no way. She's not a believer. I go, I'm not going to bring her into my house. I know what that's going to be like. And, you know, so I rejected the idea. Okay, I didn't pray about it. I rejected the idea. Well, I started finally praying about that, and the Lord started dealing with me, and I felt like we needed to have her come. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this girl's going to come over here, because I know how that stuff is, you know. The guys are all going to be after her. And so anyway, we decided to have her come, and I just told her, I said, now look, if you're going to come live with us, I don't expect you to, I mean, I understood where she was coming from. I said, I don't mind if you go out and do things. No, but I don't want you coming home drunk or, you know, smoking weed or anything, because I'll smell it. I can even tell you what brand it is, you know. And I said, you know, none of that stuff. No boys on the side. Well, you know, I knew that probably wasn't going to go, but I said, one thing, though, I do want you to do, if you're going to come live with us, you've got to agree to this. You have to go to church with us. Now, we never messed with her. We never, I didn't even witness to her. We didn't do anything. We just, you know, we were walking around the house, you know, and Stella's over there going, oh, hallelujah, you know. And we're just living our life. And so this girl's caught there. And she's at church. She's sitting there. And so this went on for about 2 or 3 months. And me and my wife were sitting there one night in our bed. We hear this knock on the door. And we open the door, and there's Maria. She's crying like a baby. And she just says, I got to get right with God. So she gave her heart to the Lord and got right with God, and then ended up finding a husband, a holy husband, and stayed in America. But when she was with us, she was fine. But once she moved out, with somebody that wasn't a real strong Christian, she began to move toward the world. And that girl has struggled off and on her whole life. Now see, this is what we're trying to avoid here. Lot, it was the same way with Lot. We'll see. So anyway, let's go to verse 1 again. Now, the Lord said to Abram, go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I show you, and I'll make you a great nation, and I'll bless you, and I'll make your name great, and so you shall be a blessing, and I'll bless those who bless you, and I'll curse those who curse you. And in all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Now, how many know that this works both ways? Why do we need to go to church? Why do we need our children in church? For the very reason I'm talking about. Because they leave and they go out there and who knows where they're at, I'm always asking like Ebony, hey, Ebony, how you doing? How everything okay? Or Angie, they go to secular schools. Now, Joselle and Sabella and Gabby and Ethan, they're homeschooled, so I'm not so concerned about them because, like, if Ethan does anything, his dad will whoop him good, I mean, these guys over here, all the homeschool kids, we have them under our watch and our, where they're, so the temptation for them will be later on. But right now, they're in a good place because they're protected. Boy, you send these kids out into these elementary, you got the transvestites and transdendite and the transosauruses and everything else, and all that kind of stuff, sitting there and teaching them this stuff and that thing and drag queens. And, to me, if I was a parent, I'd go ballistic. I say, you put my child in there, I'll sue you. My child will not sit in a drag show at school. If you put her in there, do you understand me? In no uncertain terms, a lawsuit's coming your way. And if more parents did like that, then we wouldn't have these issues. All these tutti frutti, whatever it is. So it was like, Lucky Charms or something at school. But anyway, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you'll be a blessing. He says, whoever hangs out with you is going to be blessed. So verse 4. So Abram went forth as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. Not good, but anyway, it happened. Now, Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. This gives me hope. He's a young guy. He had kids after 75. You know what I got to say to that? I don't think so. And Sarah, she was all dried up. She went through her menopause and everything. And the Bible says all of a sudden they started feeling frisky. And probably Abraham hadn't felt frisky in years. You understand what I'm saying there, and her, all of a sudden, they started feeling frisky. Next thing you know, they got a kid. Ay, ay, ay. Verse 5, Abram took Sarah, his wife, and Lot, his nephew, and all their possessions, which they had accumulated, and the persons which they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. Thus, they came to the land of Canaan. Now, Abram passed through the land as far as the site of Shechem to the oak of Moreh. Now, the Canaanites were there in the land. And the Lord appeared to Abram and said to his descendants, I will give you this land. So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. Then he proceeded from there to the mountains of the east to Bethel, which means the house of God or the house of bread, and pitched his tent, opened his tent toward Bethel, and Bethel on the west side and Ai on the east, and there he built an altar to the Lord, called upon the name of the Lord. Abraham journeyed on toward the Negev. Okay, hop to chapter 13. Now, so there's an amount of time that's going by. Lot and Abram were journeying through the desert. Lot, a younger man, Abram 75 years old. I'm sure Lot was probably in his, 25, 30, whatever it was, 35. And I can understand how when you're going through the desert, when you're a young man, that can get old. So I understand that part. I also understand the part that I'm sure Lot had, like all kids, a little bit of a rebellious streak in him. and was thinking, man, I'd sure like to get delivered from my, he's a good guy, I love him, but I'd like to do my own thing. So that started coming up, I'm sure, in his mind, and the enemy started working on him. Let's look at verse 1 of 13. So Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev, and his wife and all that belonged to him, and Lot with him. Now Abraham was very rich in livestock and silver and in gold. So to become very rich that way takes some time. Is that right? So Lot saw that. Now Lot observed Abram's faith. Lot saw him pray. Lot probably prayed with him. Lot was at least in there. And this is a lot of problems in the church. You need to understand with, as an example, preachers or people that are serving the Lord and your children. Your children are on your coat strings to a certain extent, and you need to wing them off of that into their own faith. Because if they don't get that, they're not going to be strong. Apparently Lot, see, Abram, he got the Ur of Chaldeans out of himself. Right? But Lot never did. They went out of the Ur of Chaldeans, but they never got the Ur of Chaldeans out of themselves. Abram did, Lot didn't. Does that make sense? In other words, he was thinking about it. Wow, when we lived back there, we had the best barbecue. We had the best movie theaters. We had this and that. We go out and have the great restaurants and all this kind of stuff, and we had all this stuff. Now we're out here in the middle of this desert, and all we do is smell cattle, and we work every day really long. It's hard, it's difficult. Back then, they had all the young ladies and everything, and I'm stuck out here. And he started thinking about that stuff. Well, verse 3, he went on his journeys from Nibon as far as Bethel to the place where the tent had been in the beginning between Bethel and Ai, to the place of the altar which he'd made there formerly. There Abraham called on the name of the Lord. Now Lot, who went with Abraham, also had flocks and herds and tents. Because you see, God had said, whoever you bless will be blessed. Just being around Abraham, this guy got rich, this young man. And this goes to show you what happens to a lot of people. This is why the Bible says, be careful about riches. Nothing wrong with being rich or having money, but you got to be careful about it. Because it didn't affect Abram at all. He was very rich. He didn't really seem to care about that much. But Lot, it did affect. A lot of people around the word-oriented movement, they got in trouble with riches. A lot of preachers are in trouble with riches. They don't know how to, handle that. If you've been poor your whole life, then all of a sudden you get a big church or something, you get rich. If you look down in Nigeria, some of these guys, they've had nothing in their life. Next thing you know, they're con artists. They get a big congregation, have a big old house, have all these harems and everything else they got it made. And they're the only one in the city that has a big house. And they kind of control the city. It's almost like being a sorcerer or something. There's a lot of that. And it's unfortunate. But Abram, he was different. So the land could not sustain them, verse 6, while dwelling together. For their possessions were so great that they were not able to remain together. That's a lot of possessions. So there came a time here where there had to be a separation. And that's kind of normal. Verse 7, and there was strife between the herdsmen of Abraham's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. And now the Canaanite and the Perizzites were dwelling there in the land. So Abraham said to Lot, notice Lot didn't say to Abraham, Abram said to Lot, please let there be no strife between you and me. Everybody look up at me. How many know strife is deadly? Yeah. Where there's envying and strife, there's confusion and every evil work. And the man of God said, we can't have this. This is going to cause a lot of problems. So we want to make sure we get this done, get out of this. I'm sure Abram had no intention of Lot going to Sodom. He wasn't even thinking that way. But also, on the other hand, he can make his own decisions now. He's old enough and so on and so forth. So Abram said to Lot, please, let there be no strife between you and me, nor between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brothers. Is not the whole land before you? I mean, there's a lot of land out there. All this land out there. You can choose to go any way you want to. I'll let you go. Doesn't matter. God's going to bless us. That's his thinking. His thinking, wherever I go, even if it's dry, even if there's desert, doesn't matter, because God's going to bless me. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me If to the left, then I'll go to the right. Or if to the right, then I'll go to the left. You choose. Lot lifted up his eyes. How many know you got to watch your eyes? And saw all the valley of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere. Well, he's thinking, man, says, I don't have to irrigate or any of that kind of stuff. I go, look at how well watered that's all green. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, because it's not green no more. Like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you go to Zoar. So Lot chose for himself all the valley of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed eastward. You know, to me, that's selfish. You would think that he would be very thankful to Abram for making him rich, actually. And he'd say, I'll take you choose, I'll take whatever's left over here. But he didn't. That goes to show you where he's at spiritually speaking. So Lot chose for himself all the valley of Jordan, and Lot journeyed eastward. Thus, they got separated from each other. Verse 12, Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled in the cities of the valley and moved his tents as far as Sodom. So he's right outside there of Sodom. Now, if you have a King James Bible, which I like better for this particular translation, it says he pitched his tent toward Sodom. And they had these great big tents. These guys, I mean, the things were huge. When they said it was like a circus tent, they're wealthy. That's, they weren't, in a Cub Scout tent or anything, So when they pitched that tent, they'd open the flaps. So you'd sit at night, eat your dinner, whatever you're doing, sit down and look out of the tent to see the view of wherever you're looking at. And Lot chose to look at Sodom. Now, what we see with our eyes and what we put into our minds is important, isn't it? Now, I'm not saying he could see everything, but I'm sitting there, I think at night, there's a beautiful stars are out and it's really dark, and you look over there and you see the lights of Sodom, big city, and you see all that going on, and there's a lot of activity, and then you hear stuff, you hear all of the people partying, and you hear the bands playing, and they got good music going on, and people are dancing, and then you smell the barbecue, and you smell all of the restaurants, and they got a good Mexican restaurant right outside there, all that kind of stuff, and it started pulling on him. He knows what's going on in there. He knows what's going on in there. He knows he shouldn't be going there. But, the pole. The pole. So, verse 13 says, now the men of Sodom were wicked exceedingly. I mean, they weren't just wicked. They were all the way in. These people were sold out to evil. I mean, this is not a city you want to join yourself to. Tim and I were talking before church tonight. They went on a vacation, and they came across a place, I think Springfield. What was it? Springfield or? Eureka Springs. Don't go there. Where's that? Arkansas. And they didn't know, but it's one of the, people walking down the streets holding hands, men and women, men and every kind of crazy thing in the world. It's that whole thing set up like that. And there's a lot of towns like that now. You don't pitch your tent toward those. No. You don't, I don't know how many people I've seen say, I'm going to go to Reno. I came into Reno, and the first thing there's a man in Reno who ran the mission. His name was Bob. You remember his name? Bob. I can't remember his name. Great man, wrote some really good books. Wonderful word of faith, strong, spirit-filled guy. And we were friends. Immediately he says, Tom, I want you to come over. I want to talk to you. I'm new there. So I go in and I sit down in there, and he was like a lot older than I was, and he'd been there for 20, 30 years running the mission. And when you run a mission, you see some stuff. And he looks at me and says, I want you to know something, young man. He says, I don't know how many men I have seen come into this city that were going to take the city for Jesus and all this. And he said, many of them were preachers, and a lot of them were spirit-filled preachers, and a lot of them were even word of faith preachers, and then you have that people that weren't preachers, but they're lawyers and doctors and all of that. He says these guys ended up out of ministry and in my mission because they started messing around. And they mess around with the women, they're messing around with the gambling, and the next thing you know, some of those lawyers, as an example, had families, and they would tell Bob, look, this time, man, I'm out of here. After I get out of this mission, I'm going home. And they would never make it out of the city because that called them. Just one more time, I'm going to hit the big one before I get, and he told me, he said, I'm sitting here going, I can't believe this. These people came in here to preach the gospel and start churches. Look, they're in my mission. Derelicts, alcoholics, drug addicts, cocaine up your nose. And I had one guy come to me and sit down in my office and said, I need some help. He said, I want you to help me because I'm a Rhema graduate. I go, what? He goes, I'm a Rhema graduate. I know that your church is affiliated with all that. I want you to help me. I said, where do you, are you a pastor or a leader? Well, no, and you could tell, you could smell him, smell like beer, like booze. He says to me, no, he says, but I got to tell you this, Jesus told me that I was going to hit the big one. And when I hit the big one, he says, I'm going to tithe to your church if you help me. I go, well, number one, Jesus didn't tell you that. And number two, you wouldn't tithe to anybody. You'd be over there gambling it all away like you have your whole life, you stupid thing, you. What I should have said to him is, yeah, and I'll cast that thing out of you if you want me to. And I said, I can't believe this guy. He's a con artist, and he just knew our church was affiliated with all that. So, and I got his name, and I called him. Roy Craig, who worked for Brother Hagin for 10 years, he was a crusade director, was one of my best friends. I said, Roy, check on this guy. Was he a Rage? Sure enough, he was a Rhema grad. Point I'm trying to say is, you just don't go walking into a city like Reno with a wild hair. You're in trouble. And then we got these little single mamas who are going to go, I'm going to go there because I can get a job. Yeah, I know what job you're going to get. You're going to end up as a cocktail waitress. And, I would have these preachers in, Larry Huggins, and, Larry will tell you, they stay at the Peppermill Hotel Casino. They're very nice to me. And we'd be sitting there and we'd be eating and all this to these preachers, and then all of a sudden these girls would come up to what do you call those, waitresses? And they did not dress much. They dressed down, put it that way. And it's really embarrassing when, because we're winning souls, we got all these churches growing, when somebody in your church serves you. I'm going, well, I wish you wouldn't come over here now, I have to. Hey, Pastor. And that happened a lot, because we're in a city that's like this. And, people want to move there. And I go, no. You'd be better off making less money. Don't go there. They want to move to San Francisco. I go, are you out of your mind? Do you have any idea what that's like there? No, I don't know. It's nice. It's by the beach. Sitting on the dock of the bay. Watching the tide roll away. I said, yeah, a lot of people are sitting on the dock of the bay watching the tide roll away. Yeah. Oh, no, I want to go to California. No. I moved to California. That's where the action is. I go, I've been there. You need to stay. Door County is boring. I said, you're an idiot. You're going to move to Chicago? What's wrong with you? I tell them, you're going to move to Chicago? You're going to go to school in Madison? Well, unless you're playing football on a scholarship or something like that, you don't go down to Madison. I don't care who you are. That's crazy down there. Okay. Thank you for your enthusiasm. We have a God in Wisconsin called education, especially up north. If you don't go to college, hell breaks loose. If you don't send your kid to college, you're ostracized. Everybody needs an education, don't they? Not like you're talking about. You go there, You go out to college, you know what my education was? Beer, number 101. How much beer can you drink and how much dope can you smoke without passing out? And I was in a fraternity house, and they all got through it just good because we had the test before we even took the test.
Yeah, right.
Isn't that nice?
That's your doctors, right?
Yeah, there you go. You got a bunch of doctors that cheated their way through doctor school. That's when they work on your brain. And you know, that's why when you go to the doctor, they say, wait a second, let me Google it.
I've heard many people say the doctors do that.
Let me Google it and make sure that I know what I'm doing here. I'm going to tell you. I go, I could have done that myself. Well, never mind. These men, the men of Sodom, were wicked exceedingly. And you're going to take your family or whatever and go there? Right? Verse 14. And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, now lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land which you see, I will give it to you and your descendants forever. I'll make it your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if anyone can number the dust of the earth, then your descendants can be numbered. Arise, walk about the land through its length and breadth, and I'll give it to you. And Abraham moved his tent and came direct by the oaks of Amerim, where are in Hebron, and then he built an altar to the Lord. Now go ahead and turn in your Bibles, chapter ahead, to chapter 18. Chapter 18, where we pick up more on Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot, Abram, and what happened. This would make a really, really good movie if they did it right. Verse 20, and the Lord said, the outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is indeed great, and their sin is exceedingly grave. Now, apparently Abram had known that Lot had moved there, because somewhere along the line, I'm sure they came to visit or whatever it was, and he found out that his family was in there, and he probably didn't like it at all, and he knew what was going on. It's hard when people, their children or the people they're responsible for, go through these things. It's a mess. And as a pastor, I hear these stories. Man, my son or my daughter got into wherever they're at now, and they're just out there. They turned into a homosexual, or they think they're a lesbian and everything else. And I'm thinking, man, it would have been good if you didn't send them to school. Because most of the time, that's where they learn that type of activity. Really? Pastor Tom, really? See, that hurts people. They go, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. I just want them to have an education. Yeah, what kind of education do they give you? Huh? They really don't. I don't know if they even give you an education now. Unless you go specifically to be a lawyer or a doctor or something like that, where you have to go, you're throwing yourself into a giant cauldron of witchcraft. It's just Satanism and witchcraft and humanism, and they're stirring it all up down there. And when you walk in there, if you have any kind of morals, or you stand for Jesus or something, you're going to get blasted and mocked and made fun of and become a freak. And if you're strong enough to take it, that's okay. Right. But if you're not strong enough to take that, and most people aren't, that's not okay. And so the Lord said, this outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is indeed great, and their sin is exceedingly grave. Verse 21, I'll go down now and see if they have done entirely according to the outcry which has come to me, and if not, I'll know. Verse 22, then the men turned away from there and went towards Sodom. Now, how many know these are angels? They appeared as men, but they're angels. And they were sent specifically to go down there because God knew what was going on. But you see, God does everything right, so nobody can accuse him of never doing anything right. So I sent him down there, go check it out, bring me your report back. So from there, he went to Sodom. Well, Abraham was still standing before the Lord. And let me tell you something, Abraham was standing before the Lord immediately, because he knew we got an issue here. They're going to go down there. They're going to see the wickedness of that. God's going to destroy it, and I got lots down there. So what you going to do when your family gets in a position like that? Verse 23 tells us, Abram came near and said, will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Ask him a question. And he was, standing on the goodness of God. Moses did that, didn't he? The people would act wickedly, Korah, and so on and so forth. We studied about that. And immediately God was saying, get out of the way. I'm gonna wipe them all out. I'm gonna make a new, a whole new bunch of people out of you. Moses would go, Lord, if you do that, the Egyptians they're gonna mock you and say if you do that, the whole world will know. If you do that, Lord, they're all gonna say you can't get your people into the promised land. And man, Moses got right in the Lord's face. And why? He was a friend of God. He knew he didn't cross any lines. He wasn't disrespectful, but he got right there. And then he would read them what the Bible says. I'll make a great nation out of this and that and the other thing. Well, Abram's about ready to do the same thing. He had a covenant with God. He knew the only hope. Everybody say the only hope. Let me tell you something about these backslidden Christians, these light Christians. The only hope they have is us. That's it. If we don't pray, they're going to get sucked up in the world, and a lot of them are going to walk right away. You know how many times I've seen people walk away? We're talking about preachers. We had a preacher down here in Madison. That's part of the problem. He went down there. Remember that? I think Melissa and Jennifer remember. Nice kid, nice looking kid. Wouldn't have anything to do with me. I always thought that was strange. There was two of them. One of them we had come to preach at the church. He'd been healed of cancer. And there was, there was another one. And I'd ask, why won't they have me come preach? They got Mark Brazee who goes down there. They got Larry Huggins who goes down there. I'm here. Why don't they have me? Because I invited him up. And the other one, if I go into their church or whatever, he'd run the other way. I go, that's kind of fishy, isn't it? I smell a rat. And they had a pretty good church going down there, and we were trying to be fellowship with them and everything, And I noticed they'd go down there to them Kenneth Copeland meetings, and they'd rent a limo and dress all these nice suits and try to play like they, had all this money and everything. And me and Stella were sitting in the back. We could have cared less about that kind of nonsense. Drove our old beat up whatever it was we had over there. That kind of stuff to me is just ridiculous. And trying to pretend, Well, something was up. Well, we found out because all of a sudden the guy he decides. He tells his parents are in this church and everything. He says, one day he just says, well, I'm gay. And I'm moving. I'm going out to California with an aching in my heart. And and so he left and he went out there and he started, working in these homosexual churches. A Spirit-filled guy. Had been saved, filled with the Holy Ghost, spoke in tongues, and believed in all that. Now he's in there, he thinks he's gay. Now, see, the reason he didn't want me there, I might have been able to help him. But the only problem with that is he's the pastor. And I'd turn around and go, come out of him. They start screaming out or something. But you know what? He needed deliverance. He never got deliverance. He wanted to play with boys, or whatever. And you know what? That kind of stuff, I couldn't believe it. First time I heard of that years ago, starting to creep into churches. And I just sit there and go, that's no good. Never happened though amongst us Spirit-filled, Word of Faith-oriented people. No way. Then I saw one on the internet they just termed themselves, we're the first Word of Faith charismatic homosexual church. I go, you got to be out of your mind. I wonder if Brother Hagin knows about that, Remagrads, And I'm telling you what, man, look, I'm just off on this. So Abram knew what to do. Verse 24, suppose there are 50 righteous within the city, will you indeed sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of 50 righteous who are in it? This is why we need to keep praying for these states and places, because there's some people there standing for the Lord, you know. Far be it from you to do such a thing, to slay the righteous with the wicked. I mean, he's just telling the Lord, hey, that ain't right to do that, would it be? It wouldn't be right to do that, would it, Lord? Would it, Lord? Would it, Lord? So that the righteous and the wicked are treated alike? Nah. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly? He's giving it to him. He's using the covenant. He's using common sense. He's pleading his case. Verse 26. So the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I'll spare the whole place on their account. I'll spare the whole place for 50 of them. Verse 27. Abraham replied, now behold, I have ventured to speak to the Lord, although I am not but dust and ashes. In other words, another question. Verse 28. Suppose the 50 righteous were lacking 5, and he whittled it down to 45 now, right? Will you destroy the whole city because of the 5? And he said, I will not destroy it if I find 45. Verse 29. He spoke to him again and said, suppose 40 are found there. And he said, I will not do it on account of the 40. Then he said, oh, may the Lord not be angry. I know I'm pushing this. And I shall speak. Suppose 30 are found there. And he said, I won't destroy it for 30. I wonder how far he could have took this. Huh? And he said, now behold, I have ventured to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there. He said, I will not destroy it on the count of 20. I think the Lord knew already how many there was. Then he said, oh, may the Lord not be angry, and I shall speak only this once. One more time, Lord. How about 10? If there's 10 found there, and he said, I will not destroy it on the count of 10. As soon as he had finished speaking to Abraham, the Lord departed, and Abraham returned to his place. Now, I'm convinced that Abraham said, there's got to be 10. Right? So he said, I got this done. I know that there's lots there, probably his family, you know. There's got to be 10. There's got to be a few others that, and he was wrong. Chapter 19. Now the 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. Now that tells you that he held a position of authority in that city. And you did not have a position of authority unless you signed off on their lifestyle, and probably was part of their lifestyle now. You mean, Pastor Tom, are you saying that Lot was playing around with the men? Yes. I'm totally convinced of that, because he would have never been able to get a place in that city unless he was one of them. Now, he may not have, he knew he was doing wrong, he knew it, but yet he's sitting in that place, but yet God still called him righteous. Yeah. This is why we got to be quick, we got to be careful about judging and just pray for people. Can you say amen to this now? Sitting at the gate of Sodom, when Lot saw him, he rose to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. Now, did he know they were angels, or did he just thought they were men? Either way, it's interesting. And I'm sure he's thinking, I'm sitting here at the gate of the city, man, I don't want these guys to come in here, because I know what's going to happen when they come in here. He must have been handsome, fellas. Oh boy, kind of like going into prison. If you're a handsome boy and you're going into the pen, Bubba and the boys, you're in big trouble. Hey, that's reality. People need to hear that. Keep them out of prison.
That's right.
You're so tough. You find out these guys, man. I know a boy that used to be in my church sometimes who ended up in prison, and that happened to him, ruined his life. You all know him. Last name is Penshaw. And he said, now behold, my lords, please turn aside into your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise early and get out of here. I'm paraphrasing. They said, however, no, but we will spend the night in the square. Yet he urged them strongly. So they turned aside to him and entered his house, and he prepared a feast for them and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, surrounded the house, both young and old, and all the people from every quarter. Look at verse 4. Now let me ask you a question. Are you ready for these questions, Stephanie? There was people in Sodom, so they must have had wives, because homosexuals cannot have babies. Right. So they were either homosexual or bisexual or both. And it says that in verse 4, before they laid down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom surrounded the house, both young and old. Wow. Now, if you look up the word young, it was meant there, a lot of them were very young. So apparently they were being raped even when they were little tiny kids. People said, well, just because you're a homosexual doesn't mean you're a pedophile. I agree with that, but yet here we see that could be a situation. Because the Bible says so. And then it says all the people from every quarter, even the women are there. So apparently their women had given themselves over to this too. Y'all see that? Huh? Maybe you've never seen that before. Think about it. Everybody in the whole town, men, women, children, everybody, we're in on this deal. Fresh meat. Here we go. Yep. Wow. No wonder it's exceedingly sinful to God. You know? And they called a lot and said to him, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out that we may have relations with them. I had some lady on my deal the other night when I talked about having a relationship with the Lord is, you know, the word intercourse, spirit to spirit. She thought don't use that word. Why? Why not? That's the most intimate term you can have. I'm not talking about anything disgusting. You know, people need to grow up. I'm serious. If she's watching, you need to grow up. You shouldn't, interrupt somebody's ideas. Because what I do, and you might have noticed this, is I lay it down the way it is. The way people think today, we have to get right into their brain. Because I'll tell you what, man, the way they think is they bring these people out that we may have relations with them. They want to have sex with them. The whole bunch of them. Yeah. Wow, geez. I'm telling you what, that's a city. That's just like, don't want to go there for vacation. Verse 6, but Lot went out to them at the doorway and shut the door behind him. And he said, please, my brothers, right there. Right there, you say, my brothers? You don't call these people your brothers. I've heard people do that. Oh, my brother. No, they're not your brother. The only brothers you have are either born blood brothers or Christian brothers. You know, I'm not gonna hook up in some kind of a covenant way with them. Please, my brothers, do not act wickedly. Now, behold, I have 2 daughters who have not had relations with men. Please let me bring them out to you and do to them whatever you like. Only do nothing to these men insomuch as they come under the shelter of my roof. And let me paraphrase this. We don't want the women, we want the men. Verse 9. But they said, stand aside. Further, they said, this one came in as an alien and already he's acting like a judge. Now he'll treat you worse than them. You know what they're saying? Who do you think you are? You're over here doing the same things we are. Now you're trying to tell us what to do? Yeah. That's crazy, man. Give them your daughters. What a sick deal that is. So they pressed hard against Lot and came near to the break door. Why does it like to have a dad like that? Oh, here, take my daughters. Pastor Tom, what would you have done? Well, I wouldn't be there, number one, but if I did, I'd have a shotgun. I'd be loaded up for bear, man. They're not getting in there. But the men reached out to their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. They struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves trying to find the doorway. You know, trying to mess with angels, not a good idea, by the way. Mark that down. Verse 12, then the two men said to Lot, whom else have you here? I got a son-in-law, and your sons and your daughters, and whomever you have in the city, bring them out of the place. Everybody say son-in-law. Interesting. So I thought his daughters were virgins. Apparently not. So what was he saying? Oh, they're virgins. Take them. He's lying. And I don't know why he did that. Somebody said one time, I was reading something on it, and they said, oh, that's a custom. I go, what custom? From where? What father would ever do something like that? I don't care what custom. No. Verse 13. For we are about to destroy this place because their outcry has become so great before the Lord has sent us to destroy it. In other words, there's not 10 here. We're gonna destroy them completely. That's our assignment. You better get them out of here. Lot went out and now notice this, verse 14. Notice this. Lot went out and spoke to his son-in-laws. They were part of this whole gang. They're part of the gang out there. His son-in-laws. And notice their response. Who were to marry his daughters and said, up, get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city. But he appeared to his son-in-law to be jesting. You can tell where he's at. I ain't going with you. You're crazy. You're out of your mind. That's not going to happen. Verse 15, when morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, up, take your wife and your 2 daughters. Everybody say, wife and 2 daughters. That's it. The rest of them rejected it. Yeah, a lot of people reject deliverance. A lot of these people. Wow. Who are here, or you'll be swept away in the punishment of the city. So is it possible for a righteous man to be swept away in the punishment of the city? The answer to that is yes. See that? Verse 16, but he hesitated. Why are you hesitating, man? You know what I think I would have done is I would have got on my gym shorts and my tennis shoes, and I would have ran out of there as fast as I possibly could, taking my family with me. And if somebody didn't want to come, I'd pick them up, kicking and screaming, and carry them out of there. Because you know it's coming. Of course, Lot knew. Lot had sat there with Abram. They knew about, some of this stuff, and look, he knew God, but he hesitated. So the men seized his hand. They had to grab his hand and pull him out of there. And the hand of his wife, wow, and 2 daughters, for the compassion of the Lord was upon him, and they brought him out and put him outside the city. He might have stayed there. When they had brought them outside and said, escape for your life, do not look behind you and do not stay anywhere in the valley. Escape to the mountain or you'll be swept away. But Lot said to them, oh no, my lords. Now behold, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have magnified the loving kindness which you have shown me by saving my life. But I cannot escape to the mountains, for the disaster will overtake me and I will die. Now behold, this little town over here is near enough to flee to. It's a small place. Let me escape there, or is it too small, that my life may be saved? And he said, behold, I will grant you your request, also which to overthrow the town which you have spoken. I won't overthrow that one. In other words, you'll be safe there. Hurry, escape, therefore I cannot do anything until you arrive there. Therefore, the name of the town was called Zor. The sun had risen over the earth. Then Lot came to Zor. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah fire and brimstone out of heaven, and he overthrew these cities and all the valleys and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. But his wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Now, I wonder if anybody ever had that salt for dinner. Thanksgiving, a little Sodom and Gomorrah on my meal here. You don't know, it might be that Himalayan salt. You don't know. That pink salt, the one that's supposed to be good for you, Look at verse 27. Now Abraham arose early in the morning and went to the place where he had stood before the Lord. And he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah toward all the land of the valley, and he saw, and behold, the smoke of the land ascended to the smoke of the furnace. Thus it came about, when God destroyed the cities of the valley, that God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot lived. Verse 30. What happened to Lot? What was his lifestyle and the things he had done? What happened to him? Was he a man that served God the rest of his life? Did he have a good life? Let's take a look. Verse 30. Lot went up from Zoar and stayed in the mountains, and his 2 daughters with him. For he was afraid to stay in Zoar, and he stayed in the cave, he and his 2 daughters. So the guy is reduced to staying in the cave. Here's a man that owned, was very wealthy. He lost all his money. He lost all his possessions. He lost his cattle. Verse 31. Then the firstborn said to the younger, our father is old, and there's not a man on earth to come into us after the manner of the earth. Now, what was in their hearts? Man, talk about a bad spirit. Think about this. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and let us lie with him, that we may preserve our family through our father. Nice little incest going on. Ding, 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 Verse 33. So they made their father drink wine that night, and I don't think they probably had to force him. And the firstborn went in and lay with his father, and he did not know when she lay or when she arose. That's kind of hard to believe. He must have been completely blasted. But it happened. Verse 34. On the following day, firstborn, he said to the younger, behold, I lay last night with my father. Let us make him drink wine tonight. So he's going on a binge. Then you go and lie with him, that we may preserve our family through our father. So they made their father drink wine that night also, and the younger arose and lay with him, and he did not even know it when she laid down and when she arose. I mean, he must have been plastered. He must have been blackout, right? Verse 36. Thus both the daughters of Lot were with child by their father. Nice. I wonder if they had I wonder if they had little tails. Yeah, like 12 toes. Yeah. Verse 36. But notice this. This is the part I want you to get. What was his legacy? Thus both the daughters of Lot were with child by their father. The firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites this day. And the younger one bore a son and called his name Benjamin, and he is the father of Ammon to this day. The Moabites and the Amorites were thorns in Israel's flesh the whole time. Lot's legacy was a bunch of occultists and pagans that came from incest with his daughters that literally raped him. So he took his family into Sodom, and that's what he got out of it. Isn't that something? I got through that pretty good, didn't I? There's a warning here for us today, a big warning. You cannot allow your children and your family and yourself to get yourself because of a job, because of finances, because of anything else. You got a good church, you got a place to go, you got a family of God in this day and age. You don't get up and move across the state because you got a better job, you think. You know how many times I've seen that? And what happened, Pastor Tom? Well, they came to me and said, our ship has come in. I got this job, Yeah, but your family, your 3 kids got healed, miracles in my church. You're going to take them out now? And we're going to move over to Hobunk, wherever it was, in Arizona. I said, where are you going to go to church? Oh, we didn't thought of that yet. You know what I mean? You're going to move your family. You don't even think of going to a good church. You don't even know if you have a good church. Yeah. Well, we'll find a good church. No. Okay. Well, more power. Lasted 3 months. Lost his job. Divorce. His family went nuts. And you know how many times I've seen that kind of thing? Now, it's not just because they're going to church here. I'm saying pastors across America, everywhere I've ever been, had the same thing over and over and over again. They've got people that are going to a good, solid church, not just this church, but a good, solid church. They love God. They're in fellowship. They're receiving from God. They've had miracles in their lives. Their families are doing good, and they end up doing some stupid, idiotic thing without even really praying about it because of money or this thing or mama needs me or my brother needs me.
Right, preach it. Yes. Come on.
You need to be thinking and praying about what God says for you to do. Because he's trying to protect. Well, that was good. That was worth the price of a mission. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and receive an offering. And the guys out there that are, if there's anybody still left with me on the camera, which is probably not. If you guys want to give out there, you know, you can go down below. There's links to give. Become a partner with us because we need partners. Yeah, this is one of those nights where my Facebook, my number of people on Facebook will go down. They'll say, you're just legalistic and nasty and mean and cruel and all that. You know what I got to say to that? If you think that way, you really got spiritual problems. I just read to you out of the Bible. I just read to you out of the Bible how dangerous this is, and yet you think you're above that. Okay, wait and see. Preachers, true preachers today are warning people. We're warning people. This is what this series is all about. It's warnings. Amen. Plus, the older I get, the more cantankerous I get, so it's great. I'm cantankerous now. I just don't pull punches. I used to be like nice. I'm not so nice anymore. When I look around and I see what's going on out there, I'm going to let them have it. All right. Well, we will pray over that offering. We'll pray over that offering Sunday morning. God bless you. You're dismissed. Love all.